Yeah, I would like to speak to the topic of put a label on it. And a few weeks ago, I I walked into a place I normally visit, and usually there's a young lady at the reception. Um, a week or two prior to when I made this observation, I was aware that she was going away. I heard um, a conversation um, that took place. And so when I returned a few weeks after, I noticed that she had actually returned back um, to to work. So I obviously exchanged pleasantries and asked her how her break was, and she said that she had been away on holiday with her partner for a week, and they had a fabulous holiday and was very thrilled. And I made note of it, and I thought perhaps I'd use it as a teaching lesson and as an opportunity perhaps uh, to share with the ladies how to be aware um, of not being gained. Um, the lady in question was probably about 21, very young. Um, I took issue, although I never shared my initial impression, I took issue with the word partner. And it's a conversation that mirrored something I have had with a number of people, women particularly, in trying to explain to them how men think. Um, and I hope today's session will be perhaps put across in the right way. Um, the purpose is to give out some of the game we play as men, um, so that you women can know what to ask for and not be fooled by titles that mean absolutely nothing. Now, one of the reasons why we name things is so that we can claim things. It's a statement of biology and a statement of um, creativity. No, let me take that back. It's not so much a statement of biology, it's something that can be observed through the act of biology and in the act of biology, but it's something as creators that is intrinsically in each and every one of us. We name things so that we can claim it, which is partly why if you look um, at any great civilization when they conquered the world, the first thing they did was to rename the place that they conquered, because that way they could claim it. There was a connection they had with it. Were made aware, if you believe in many of the books of antiquities, of, um, of how someone was said, here are all the animals, Adam, now you name them. Now, recognize something. Um, According to the storyteller, if you believe it, but even if you don't, it's just a story anyway. According to the storyteller, um, Adam and Eve were named by their creator. The birds of the field, or the birds of the air, the beasts of the field, the fish in the seas were named by Adam. By naming them, he took responsibility for them. The same thing happens. You meet, which is why um, I'm deviating, I know, but this is why the, art, the act of coming together with a man and taking his last name, unfortunately, Western women have been brainwashed into thinking it's like a trade, a slave trade where he's buying you, and therefore part of the patriarchy being you're forced to take his last name. No, you take the last name because he's responsible for you from now. Now, here's a good question to you: would you rather be the one who is being provided for, or the one who is doing the providing? People don't understand it. They think leadership and followership is an unequal relationship. No. Anyone who has managed a lot of people will tell you that it's like herding cats. It's not very easy. Managers are more stressed about their jobs than employees are stressed about their managers about the jobs. People don't get it. I've been in that position. I understand it very well. In any case, I deviate and I digress. Let me come back to the conversation, which is why we name you. We name you simply because we are simply sowing a seed to say we're connected with you, and we're claiming you not because you're a product or a thing to claim. We're claiming you because we're saying, I'm going to use the reference, where the heart is, there also the treasure will be. We're saying, this is where my heart is. This is a treasure I'm placing here. So this is where I will be, if that makes sense. Now, there are traditional things and there are modern things that have happened over time. Within the area of sexual dynamics and intersexual dynamics, what we find is two worlds that are trying to collide. We have a traditional world of the way things have been done since the ages, the early days, and we have things being experimented on, which we call modern. So the old we call traditional, the new we call modern. Labels, I'm putting a label on a relationship, has always been part of our lexicon since maybe after the hunter-gatherer time. Traditionally, we placed several categories, but there were few. You were unmarried, or you were married, or you were widowed, or you were divorced. 4 simple categories. Everyone who was not married and not widowed or not divorced fell under the category of unmarried. It was simple. Now, go back in time, those who were unmarried stayed with the family. You didn't have a woman without a chain of authority protecting her, looking after her, nourishing and making sure that she was preserved and cared for. According to the modern lexicon, we've changed it slightly. We have what we call being single. We have situationships. We have what we call we're talking, which in my opinion, I don't understand what it means, but it simply means perhaps nothing substantial. We have what we call dating. This I have to say, according to women, we have what we call a boyfriend and a girlfriend. We have partners and we have been married. So we've rephrased what used to be the unmarried category, and we've put so many other layers to make it more simple and easy for women to feel important. In many ways, men have sat back and have said nothing, because all of those words in many ways give us time. I'm going to speak specifically to the word partner, because that was the observation I made about the young lady at the reception. Now, let me make it very clear, at 21, there is no way in God's cursed earth that you should be using partner, or forgive me, there is no way in God's blessed universe that you should be using the word partner. Just no way. Her boyfriend, the man in her life, was certainly playing game on her. Why? She's 21, attractive, at the peak of her hotness. Similar age, from what I understand, to her. When I was 21, I had potential. But guess what? Potential is pissed away every single day. It means nothing. Absolutely nothing. Potential unfulfilled is worse than those who didn't have potential but tried their best. I don't care about potential. But a 21-year-old man has nothing to give or exchange. He brings nothing to the table. So in a negotiating interaction, the woman comes at 21 with a balance of power in her way and in her favor. But most young women do not know. They come to the table with youth, beauty, attractiveness, fertility, having been trained and groomed for 18 years with mom, and therefore still retaining all the good teachings that mom gave and all the great teachings that mom and dad combined gave to her. So she has the whole package. A woman's value, therefore, in the sexual marketplace is scored objectively, and I've done so in many videos, against what I call four different groups. Number one, your sexual marketplace value, SMV, simply measures how attractive you are, both face and all your other features. Number two, your reproductive fertility value, your ability to reproduce. The younger you are, 18, you have more fertile eggs, more quantity, and therefore your reproductive value is much higher than a woman who is, say, 45. That's just biology for you. Your non-sexual marketplace value is also quite high, which is called the NSMV. That simply says that if you're 20 or 21, you've been at home for 18 years, assuming you've come from a typical family structure, you've been empowered and taught and encouraged and guided and led, and therefore all of the teachings at 21 are still intact. You haven't gone out to the world and, university where you spend 4 or 5 years and then moving out into the big cities where you're there for sort of 6 years and you effectively lose all of what you've been taught about life and about how the family works. So your NSMV is quite high. The only thing you don't have at that age as a woman is what I call your EIV, your economic intrinsic value. And that the reason is simple. You haven't acquired enough skills and you haven't developed your talents, and therefore you haven't gone to the world and made something valuable available to the world and received something in return as compensation. So you don't have much wealth except it's been handed down to you. But it doesn't matter, because in the dating marketplace and the marriage marketplace, men don't care much about number 4. We really care about number 1. If we're dating, it's always number 1. If we want a relationship, it's number 1, number 2, number 3, in that order. Now, what this means is that the young girl who was 21, using the word partner was something perhaps women generally use these days to give themselves a sense of importance in a relationship. They don't want to use the word girlfriend. They don't want to say situationship. They don't want to say unmarried, because it makes the man feel, well, does that mean you're available to other men? Now, here is the game. We name you for one and only one reason: exclusivity. In other words, we want to feel as though you're not available to other players. You're out of the game. We do that traditionally by coming to you and saying to your father, I'd like to take a hand in marriage, and here are my promises. For your father to listen to me, I have to have gone out to the world and made something of myself. So at your similar age to you, your father wouldn't give me the day of time. He would simply say, go out to the world, young man, make something of yourself and come back. I need to ensure that I can entrust this precious gift that the universe has given to me. I can entrust to your hands my most important treasure, my daughter. So men have come up with different ways of ensuring that we get exclusivity from you, the woman, whilst allowing ourselves the time to become something of ourselves, so that we can then command what you already have in the present as beauty, but which we will only have in the future as actuality, but in the present is only potential. So partners were used. If you go back to the 1970s and late 1960s, the word partners started to come into the English lexicon by women a lot more than any other time. But we saw more of this in the 1980s. Reason: 1960s, 70s was the first wave of feminism and womanism, where women simply said, I can do everything myself. A lot of those women were in relationships. They destroyed their relationships because of their ideologies. They were unmarried. They became married. They became divorced. They went back into the marketplace. And there were men in the marketplace who found them desirable, but would not marry them, because those men recognized that, well, Why don't I just enjoy the benefits without the costs and the responsibilities? They allowed these women to move in with them. The women provided all of the services, all of the duties of a wife, but they didn't have the honor of being a wife. They didn't have a husband. More than anything, according to the state, did not have the responsibility as he would have had he married her. So she stayed for 1 year. They had kids. Remember, men need time, because as we grow old and as we age, we get more valuable. As a woman gets older, sexual marketplace wife, she loses her value. So we would trade in potential and the possibility of achieving our success and wasting a woman's youth, fertility, and prime ages. The word we were able to use was the word partner, which is why you seldom see, and go back to the 1970s, 1980s, 1990s, women who were 37 and above, 40 particularly, were the ones who used that word. It was unheard of. In the UK, in England, back then, were there exceptions? Of course. But it was hard to have found, back then, women who were 21 calling themselves partners. Go back to the 1950s, it was impossible. 1940s, impossible, because at 25, you were married. But back then, you were courted, and then you were given away in marriage. Fast forward to the 1970s, 1980s, and even today, the average age of marriage is 36, 35, 36 for women. Now this means that women are living too late. Now at 36, most men are just starting their prime. So a man simply says, well, I'll give you the title of a partner, and I'll buy more time. And in 3-4 years, I would be at the peak of my earning potential, and I can afford much more, which is why I disagree with the use of that word for younger girls, because what you're doing is you're trading your prime years for the hope of a relationship. The younger you are, it's important to apply the traditional standards to your sexual experiences. You want to say, I am unmarried, or I am married, or I am divorced, or I am widowed. When men come to you, we want to claim you as a prize. We want exclusivity. We do not want other men to come close. So here is another game. We will even propose to you. Another word you hear often is fiancé. I meet my fiancé. And these are people who have been engaged for 5, 6, 7, 8 years. We do that because we're playing game. Most men will tell you, we've done it. We had no plans or intentions of getting married. We proposed simply because we wanted our exclusivity. It was hope. It was a hope certificate. We gave her a hope certificate, recognizing that if I could get 3-4 more years, I would then make myself more valuable. I would have converted some of my potential to reality. And therefore, at that time, even if she's no longer around, I've had the best of both worlds. Not only have I had the best of her youth, it's the same as having a car. Let me use the analogy of a car. You can buy a car, you can lease a car. If you buy a car, you have to pay full price. If you lease a car, you can simply enjoy the benefits, but without the responsibilities and liabilities long term. You simply pay the agreement for the month. You lease it for 2-3 years. At the end of the 2 years, you return the car back to the dealer and you trade it in for another car. Now, yes, you're paying a premium, but what you're not doing is you're not settling down with one car. When I was 24, 25, I understood this game. A woman who was 23 was perfect, was ideal. Peak of her hotness, but I had nothing to offer. So you come up with words, promises, all of which were intended to be broken. eventually, but may not have intended to be broken at the time they were made. Because sometimes we make promises that we can't keep, which is why the transition from unmarried to married is the most important stage. You make vows to God, you make promises to people. Promises can be broken. Vows, not without a cost. So the younger you are, lean towards more traditional yardsticks and standards. The older you are, lean towards more modern standards. In other words, if you're 35, you've wasted your prime years. It becomes harder to find a man who will pay full price for the opportunity to have you as a wife. He's more likely to say, listen, you're 35, I'm 37. I can afford a woman, I can afford a car that is 27, 28, still in her prime. I can afford a car that is an Aston Martin. I don't have to drive a used Ford Focus. I've made something of myself. At that point in time, you might find that most men will choose the most attractive women they can afford because they can afford it now. They have the potential, which is now being converted to actuality. At a younger age, we recognize you're the most attractive on the block, but we can't exchange. There is no currency of exchange. So we use words. Fiancé, partnership. The younger you are, I would recommend to you that you avoid using such terms to describe your relationship with a man. Ask him very carefully and very clearly, what's next? And there should be timelines, perhaps something I should do in a different session. But let me give you a few things. This particular girl in question had moved in with a boyfriend, which is what I call him. At 22, he's a boyfriend. Way too young. Still a boy. Still has at least 10 years and more, 15 years to become a man. You're giving him your youth, beauty, attractiveness, and all the virtues you were given by mom and dad. Character, behavior, mannerisms, you're given to one man. And he's getting the best of both worlds. He gets to pay nothing. Something I also disagree with in terms of moving in with a man. Something we see. Perhaps I should do a session. I have done a session previously talking about the importance of not moving in with a man if you're a woman until you're at the right age. That age, in my opinion, is 27 and above. But when you move in, setting boundaries before you move in and timelines. And you shouldn't be with a man for more than 6 months without knowing exactly the next stage. For example, marriage. The purpose of moving in with a man is as an initial way of trying out whether marriage, long-term commitment, and being together would work for both of you. You don't move in with someone until you're ready for marriage. And it shouldn't take more than 6 months from when you move in. But you need to set boundaries. Otherwise, we get, as men, all of the benefit, none of the responsibilities. For example, let's say you're 23 and I'm roughly the same age as you, 25, 2-year difference. You are at the peak of your beauty. You are at the peak of your sexual marketplace value, the peak of your reproductive fertility value. You're still at the peak of your non-sexual marketplace value. We both have a job. We're struggling along. Or let me even make it more interesting. We both are students. We don't have a job. Mom and dad are funding our lifestyles. You move in with me, and suddenly you become my living girlfriend. You assume, without realizing this, the position of a wife. You do the cooking, you do some of the cleaning, we wake up together, we have plans, we have goals, we're building these dreams. But what are you doing? You're sacrificing your best years for a hope certificate. The hope that, who knows, in 5 years he'll be ready. Because I've said to you, well, moving with me, let's date for 2 years, we'll get engaged in a year and 18 months, and or plan a wedding. So what have I done? Move in with me, stay 6 months or for a year. 1 year I have received. I'll get engaged at the end of 1 year. I keep you engaged for 2 years. I've got 3 years from you. And at the end of the third year, then I'll decide what I want to do. So I've gone from 25 and I've technically bought 3 to 5 years from you, taking me to about 30, which is when I would have completed my education, been working for a while, started to make money, started to earn, and therefore I'm now aware of what I can afford in the sexual marketplace. At 30, you're 28. If you're stupid enough to stay with me past 30, assuming I get to 35, and let's say you're 33, you've given me 10 years of your life. Guess what? There is a newer, more attractive version of you in the marketplace. I've taken your best years, but there's no obligation I have to you. All I made was a promise, and I gave you a name, my fiance, my partner. So when we went out to places, I named you. I said, I'd like you to meet my partner, Jane. Made you feel important. Obviously, whenever I said, I'd like you to meet my partner or my girlfriend, you felt less valuable, but partner seems and sounds as though this is important. And for 10 years, you wasted your prime years on me. Tragedy. And let me share something which I'll use as a way of closing. A woman has 12 years. 12 years of what we call a peak attractiveness. Attractiveness starts to decline after 12 years. 18 to 30 is the first prime. 30 to 35 is what we call the subprime. Geriatric pregnancy starts at 36. 36 to 40, what we call that is beyond time. You're out of the picture. 40 and above, it's a wrap. Therefore, 12 years you have is the most important years of your life. So, if you date a guy for 1 year, that's 8.3% of your life. Dating life, remember your peak dating life, wasted. Recognizing 12 years. If you date a guy for 5 years, that would be 5 divided by 12, which means you've pissed out the drain 40+% of your peak dating life. And this is the reason why the decisions you make early have to be in accordance with the traditional standards and yardsticks. When you get to 35 and above, that is the time to become more casual. This is when you can assume the decision or take the decision to be called a partner, because at that point, you want to expand the options you have to find a good man who would accept you, recognizing that most men do not want to marry 40-year-old women or 40-year-old virgins. But you can expand that to say, listen, we don't have to get married. We love each other. We can provide for each other. We don't have to name it. And by subtle gestures, you can expand your pool of men. So the younger you are, stay traditional. As you hit 30, open it up to the modern approach to dating and start using terminologies and be open to terminologies that are mum, partner, fiance. And that way, what you recognize and accept is that you don't hold the bargaining power that you once had as a younger woman. But don't be naive and stupid about men. We'll run circles around you with game. Don't trust a man's words. This is why I'm disappointed. I mean, it's an understatement to say I'm disappointed. I'm disappointed that most young women these days do not have men like fathers or brothers helping them navigate the wilderness of the dating marketplace. This is what women are holding on to words that men say, and men will never be around for that hope certificate to be cashed when it's due. You have to be careful. Avoid labels that are designed to make you feel good. Instead, just wait and get the brand name. And if you do not want to be married, that is okay. But guess what? Make sure that you understand the risks that you're taking. Far too easily, and I see this so much these days, women who wear, I mean, absolutely gorgeous, 9s and 10s, 25, 26, 27. I see them today, 37, still unmarried, being used as what I call recreational facilities by men on the streets. Why? Because at 37, there's a panic that sets in, and a woman will hold on to anything a man says just for that hope. Now, I hope that you will not be one of those.